What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and a Lamp podcast. I am here with Steve
Hello.
and Tim,
Your host with the most.
and we're just going to be discussing some various NHL stuff, some big news, big trades, interesting things. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start with, I guess, the least serious news that has come out of the NHL, and that would be the Washington Capitals' new third jerseys. If you guys haven't seen them, they posted them on their Twitter account. They wore them the other night against the New York Islanders. What do you guys think about these new thirds coming out from the Capitals here?
I mean, they're
The
not terrible.
opposite of the W on it.
So Tim doesn't like them, and Steve says they're not terrible.
I don't
mean-
mind them from the back.
The jersey itself
Pause.
isn't the problem. It really is just like the logo on the front that's the problem. You know,
They said it to Wumbo.
like it's just so boring. And like they have the Weagle they can use, so it's like why wouldn't they use it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like the jersey pattern itself. I think it's nice. It's a nice combination of colors. The white shoulders are a nice touch. I just don't know why, like, you put all the effort into making a nice jersey and then you just slap a giant W with stars on it. Like, it's so plain and boring. I don't know if they're
Kind of
going for like a
just
minimalist look, but like it's just ugh.
I
Like,
mean, I'm not entirely sure myself, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, to be honest. Like
It's not the
it's
worst jersey in the league. I like the color patterns. I like the whole outfit. I just don't like the W.
yeah, that's it. That's really it, right? Like, and
And the
to
W isn't like the worst thing in the world.
well, no, to Steve's point, it's not the worst thing. It's just so safe that it's like, why did you even bother? You know, like in this case, I think I'm just so apathetic towards it that it makes me actually become not apathetic in that I actually do have an opinion because I hate it. Like,
That was a lot of negatives.
yeah, I know. But basically, like, it's so boring that it actually flips the script and actually makes me dislike it, you know? As
I
a,
mean, I understand where you're coming from.
I mean, as opposed to other logos like that were just so boring, like the Colorado Avalanche when they had Colorado across their front. Like, that was just so boring. I just didn't even care to even bother thinking about it.
I
But
didn't mind that though. That's kind of probably in the same boat as this. I didn't mind it.
it just bothered me because like the New Jersey, like the jersey itself, the pattern is cool. It's a nice mix of colors. They got a nice balance, and then they're like, oh hey, what's the logo? Well, it's Washington, and we like stars. Put a W on it. It's like, really? Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my biggest issue with it is really when you have the Weagle, right? Like, which is already a W-shaped logo. Why are you making another W-shaped logo, you know? That doesn't improve on the original.
Right.
Like they've also just done the W before and it just looked better first time.
That's kind of it. That's what I'm saying. Like, you already
Yeah.
have a logo like that, so like, why just not use?
Like why
This
go
is
with the
kind of like,
worser one?
you know what it is? This is kind of like that argument I was making about the Tampa Bay Lightning's their new reverse retros. It's like you've had so many chances in the past to use, like, for them in this case was the black jersey, and in this case it's the Capitals not using their cool like W Weagle logo. It's like you've fucked it up so many times in the past. It's like, and you had such a chance right here to get it to go right for you, and you dropped the ball again. It's like, come on, you know?
Just a missed opportunity, I think.
Like you essentially had a slam dunk because all for years everyone's been talking about what the Cap should do with that that other logo, and here they go with a chance to use it, and they just are like, nah.
I mean, I think I wouldn't be as mad if the jersey itself was also bad, but it's like, you did a good job on that. And that's the hard part, really, you know? And then
Yeah,
you just come out and,
realistically.
like, you just drop an egg on the logo, and it's like, oh, thanks. Cool. So, I'm guessing, it's kind of just a solid like we're all in the meh to ew category, you know.
Yeah, I would think so.
Very
Yeah.
unfortunate situation for the Capitals, who have had pretty good thirds in the past, but I'm not a fan of this one. So, um, I guess let's stay on the Washington Capitals. We're gonna talk here about the incident involving Alexander Ovechkin and uh, the other Russian players. It was Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Ilya Samsonov, and Dmitry Orlov. And I'm sure everyone's heard about the situation, but I'll kind of just give you a brief TLDR on the situation, which
Did
is
we get official statements, by the way, from the NHL about what happened?
Yes, the
so
Like,
Capitals issued their statement. Yeah.
okay,
yeah. So
continue. I continue. I just wanted to know.
the
No, yeah, no, it's fair.
the TLDR on the whole situation is that um, Alex Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Samsonov, and Orlov all hung out in a hotel room after a game one night, and the NHL and the NHLPA at the beginning of the season set out guidelines as to how the season's supposed to go. You're supposed to stay in your hotel room, or if you have assigned roommates, you're only supposed to be in contact with them. If you're gonna hang out with teammates, it has to be, you know, you're really not supposed to in general, but if you were going to, it's supposed to be like in a common area, like 6 feet apart with masks on. Um, and they all hung out in a hotel room. No masks were worn, and it turns out that Ilya Samsonov tested positive. I'm only using his name by name at this point because it has been confirmed by the team themselves that he was the person in question. Otherwise, you would have a Austin Matthews situation here where, again, people were reporting Samsonov was the uh, infected party before it came out from the NHL. So, I'm only using his name because it was confirmed by the team. And so because there was no mask being worn in that situation and because they were in such close quarters, Ovechkin, Samsonov, Kuznetsov, and Orlov all had to miss the team's next 4 games. And, they missed the game last night against the Islanders. They'll miss the next 3. And, there was a lot of back and forth. Ovechkin's wife came out on Instagram, posted a whole thing about it's bogus, it's BS. Like, oh, I guess COVID only works in a hotel room because these guys can be next to each other on the bench the whole time, and this, that, and the other thing. And she, for some reason, also played the oh my god, it's the Russian players card, which was weird because it was only Russian players in the room. Just a lot of like back and forth and some debates been going on in the NHL community as to like what is the purpose of these rules if again these guys are going to be next to each other on the bench, on the ice, yada yada yada. So I'm just curious to kind of get your guys' thoughts on the situation in general, the NHL's rules, and everything else before I kind of give my opinion on it. So whichever one of you wants to jump in first, just kind of hit me with what you think is going on here.
Well, I mean, I think you and I are gonna have realistically a very similar take on the whole thing. But I mean, whether or not the rule is stupid isn't the argument here, right? It's whether or not they actually broke the rule, and it's like whether or not we all think the rule is dumb or not, because yeah, these guys do spend a lot of time in close proximity with one another. But like these are the rules you signed up for. Like you didn't want to go into a bubble, so you agreed to these other set of rules, which is fair. Like I wouldn't want to go into a bubble either. So you agreed to them, you signed off on them, and now you're mad that you're getting punished for breaking them. It's like, okay, what did you expect? Like the NHL has to have some kind of like enforcement mechanism here or some kind of punishment mechanism anyway. So people aren't just breaking the rules willy-nilly because like realistically this could be a small case, but like it could jeopardize the integrity of the entire thing realistically. Like one guy gets it, gives it to another guy on his team, who gives it to a guy on another team. Now they're missing games and you're missing games, and who knows if they gave it to somebody else. And it's just a whole big like kerfuffle that could be avoided if they just follow the rules.
Kerfuffle. Did you
You
make that up
know?
on the spot?
Yeah.
I've never heard that one before.
I really try hard not to swear on the podcast, so I have to come up with like different words.
Fair point.
What do you think about this whole situation, Tim? Were you done, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the situation, Tim?
Well, I don't really have much of an opinion. Like, it's it's kind of silly. Like they broke the rule, they got in trouble, and like no feelings were hurt. No one's upset. The only person who was actually kind of upset seemed to be fucking Ovi's wife, but like she was just kind of overreacting to like the whole situation. Like it really
Er,
wasn't a big deal.
yeah, honestly, my biggest problem with the whole situation was
Like it's not
Ovechkin's
like he
wife.
lost money. Like I don't understand what the issue is. Like nothing of like real punishment happens to these guys other than they miss a couple games. So I don't know what her issue really was to like call them out. Like I could see the whole point of maybe going on and saying, "Oh, I think it's stupid that like they can't hang out, but they can fucking play together." Yeah, if you want to go make that statement, I get it. Like we all agree, so no one's really gonna bust your balls about making it. But like to the whole like there was two other parts to that statement that she made that were just stupid and unnecessary. Like the part about the Russians and like there was another part in the beginning.
Well, yeah, that was realistic. Like that was my biggest issue was it was Ovechkin's wife adding fire, like fuel to a fire that really wasn't there, you know? Like
Yeah,
it wasn't some
I thought it was
conspiracy
sad his
against the
statement.
Russians.
I thought it was sad his statement when he came out and said it. He was like, "I'm sorry, I went and hung out with my fellow teammates. I will not do so in the future. It was a mistake I should have not have made." It's like, damn, he just wants to hang out with the boys.
And it's yeah, like
And
I said,
like,
it's stupid. The rule is dumb, but like you agreed to it, you
do
know?
you know
Like
why I think the rule kind of makes sense though, to an extent? And it's because under the basis that you're playing with them, I guess you should really follow the same basis that if you play against a team, then it's the same thing. And they don't want people on different teams also mixing because then you're just quadrupling the pool essentially because of staff and personnel and everything.
well, it's kind of my point. Like it's just there's too much unknown involved.
Like it's not like the UFC's Fight Island where everyone's in quarantine and then once you're in, like you're in theory safe. Like this is a precautionary bubble kind of in the NHL that they have, not like a real bubble
Yeah.
where like the UFC and Fight Island have.
And it's also, I mean, the reality is like the NHL's understands that these guys don't live in a bubble, right? Like you're saying, like it's not Fight Island. It's not where the UFC can like get these guys away from literally everybody except for the people that are getting tested like daily. I mean, the players get tested daily, sure. But what's to say like, something as innocuous as a player's wife going to the supermarket, that could be the whole thing that puts this whole thing in jeopardy. And I'm not blaming anybody, right? Like I'm not saying his wife is the problem. It's just
Well,
like the
yeah,
truth.
she actually said that in the statement too. Like they can't get it at malls,
Like they're
like
not allowed to
shopping
go
out.
anywhere. They're like sworn to be at home. So the real issue is like the people who live in their home aren't just home all the time like they are because the reality is these guys make millions of dollars, but their spouses work, they have kids that go to school, like there's a lot of unknowns, and I think that's really what this rule is there to prevent is like one of those accidental oopsie unknowns. But like it's still stupid. I mean, they still spend I don't know how much time in close proximity to one another, but my point more stands with like you already agreed to it, so like you can't be mad that you're getting punished for it now, you know?
Yeah, I think, to kind of give my 2 cents on the whole situation, um, this isn't something that the NHL just unilaterally implemented. They came to an agreement with the Players Association on these rules. And, as far as whether or not the rule is dumb, I mean, it's definitely a bit silly. I think what the NHL is trying to do is uh, trying to just play the odds, Like, if you happen to just be lucky enough to be, to get away from a game where somebody tests positive, but then you test negative, like for example, like if one of your teammates has it during a game and you don't know, right? And then you happen to be lucky enough to not get it during the game, but then you go out and hang out with them after the game, and then you might get it at that point. Like they're just trying to play the odds at this point and limit the amount of time these guys are close together, just to play the math on the whole situation. Um, and you can say it's silly, and I kind of agree because like you're playing with them, you're practicing with them, you're in the locker room together, yada yada yada. So That being said, Ovechkin, when he decided to play this year, because there was the opt out, you could opt out of the season if you didn't want to play. When he signed up to play, he made it basically a $9 million commitment to his team to say, I'm going to follow the rules and I'm going to be on the ice as much as I can in the whole situation. And, my big thing is you're not only, the team got fined 100 grand. I'm not sure if they had the four players pay some of it or what the situation is there, but I mean that's just kind of that's just pocket change to basically everyone. Even if you're making league minimum, I mean you're still making 725K a year, so 25 grand to you is not that much, but um, you know it's not so much the money aspect that it's not so much that you're hurting your team, but now you're hurting your you're not not so much that you're hurting the office, but you're hurting your boys because now four of your players are out. And therefore your better players, your starting goaltender, a top four defenseman, and two top six forwards are gone.
Well, that's kind of it, right? It's not just some schlub on the fourth line who's sitting out. It's literally your captain.
See, it's not like when Kyrie Irving did it, and like I said about the money point, like Kyrie Irving lost like $800,000 or something like that,
Yeah,
which even to Kyrie Irving might not be much money, but that's a
I mean,
ludicrous amount of money though. Still, like just to anyone, I
and
think.
I think that part of the reason why they're fining the team in the first place is to, like Steve said, to have some kind of enforcement mechanism. Because if it was just oh, the NHL puts out a statement, you get like a, oh, you're a naughty boy situation, and then nothing happens. Why wouldn't you just go and do it again? And it's just kind of like, you're Ovechkin, you're the captain, you're supposed to be setting the example. Does it suck? Yes. Is it a little bit silly? You could argue that. But at the end of the day, you signed up to play. You made a commitment to not just your office and not just the Capitals organization, but to the guy in the locker room next to you. And, they were lucky enough yesterday to escape that game with a win. But if they lose the next three, realistically speaking, it sounds like, oh, it's only 3 games, but in a shortened season, I mean, that can be a big deal. And they're kind of lucky that their schedule is so spread out, because if certain other teams who are playing back-to-backs and then 2 sets of back-to-backs, or like 4 games in 5 nights or something like that, like they could have missed a lot more time. So in my opinion, Ovechkin made a big mistake here, or they all did, not just Ovechkin. It's not just him. They all made a big mistake. You can say what you want about the rule being silly, but it is a rule that you agreed to, and it's something that they should adhere to going forward for sure. Um, any last minute thoughts on this situation?
Not particularly. I don't think.
No,
All right, so we'll stay in the realm of team news, and we'll talk briefly here about some news that actually just came out today. Jim Rutherford is stepping down, or has stepped down, as the general manager for the Pittsburgh Penguins, citing personal reasons. The interesting thing about Jim Rutherford was originally he was brought onto the team. It was supposed to be a short-term thing, like 2 or 3 years, just to try to get another cup for Sid, and he ended up staying way past that point. He had a 7-year run with them, and he's decided today to step down. So, Steve, I know you had an interesting theory about this. Why don't you go ahead and kind of just explain your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought on it really was just like it just seemed to me like they're signaling that like they're not looking to compete anymore, right? Like when they brought in Jim Rutherford, it was after a couple of false starts for them in the playoffs where they got, a couple of early exits from the Rangers, and then they ended up with that absolutely terrible showing against the Bruins. In 5 games they scored 2 goals, or 4 games they scored 2 goals, or whatever it was. My timeline would be kind of off, but I remember Jim Rutherford coming in around this time, like after those teams sputtered in the playoffs. And the whole reason they brought him in was because they needed a bold guy behind at the helm who was willing to make decisions that would help the team to win a Stanley Cup. And eventually they went on to win 2 Stanley Cups. So it worked in their favor, I guess. But at the same time, like now it just seems like they're getting rid of him because they don't need that anymore. They're not looking to compete. They're probably looking more or less to be rebuilding, and they need a guy who's probably probably whose track record's better suited to that than somebody like Jim Rutherford. I don't know why that was so hard to get out.
Um, yeah, I mean, there have been questions about how much longer he was going to be in that office, in that position anyway. Um, Specifically over this last offseason, where some of the moves he made were very questionable, such as acquiring Mike Matheson on that contract. Like, that's going to be a problem for the next GM to have to deal with. Um, Patrick Hornquist trade, reacquiring some old pieces. You know, there were some questions about Jim Rutherford this offseason as far as how long is he really, what's his staying power at this point? And I guess we got the answer, which was not that much longer. And he had a pretty bad offseason, I think, all things considered, for them to come out of this offseason with the Mike Matheson contract, minus Patrick Hornquist, no backup safety net for Tristan Jarry to speak of, and he struggled, so it's really reflected poorly on that decision not to sign some of the backups that were available. It really was not a great offseason for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think that they're starting to recognize that the clock is not in their favor on this team. You know, the ages are starting to get up there, the pieces are starting to regress. I mean, Evgeny Malkin has been completely invisible this year, just to pick out one guy. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what they're going to be doing going forward with this roster. Do you have any thoughts on Jim Rutherford and this situation, Tim?
Not much, but I think you guys pretty much just said it all. It's pretty much just his time to go. Every GM has their time,
Yeah,
and it was just his time now. So that's where it was
and
at. And it's probably a good time to, with all the kind of shitstorm in the league right now, it's probably not the worst time to kick up a little more shit.
And, you know, he can walk away from this team with his head held high. I mean, back-to-back Stanley Cups in 2016, 2017, which was a feat that hadn't been done in quite some time, especially for a team that a lot of people were considering, yes, Stanley Cup contenders, but not really on the caliber of back-to-back. So he really came in and did a great job with that core and that team. And look, I mean, when you walk out of any general managing job, if you even have one Stanley Cup under your belt, you've done your job. And he's walking away with 2 in 2 years for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Maybe leaving them in a bit of an awkward spot as far as the roster's future is concerned. I've heard some names being thrown around for who to replace him. They were saying maybe his assistant GM was going to replace him. Somebody mentioned Jason Botterill, which you better hope is not the case if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. But we'll have to keep our eyes on the evolving situation with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And just before we wrap up on the Penguins, I mean, what's your analysis of the roster as it stands? Is this team able to compete at this point, or do you think that they're just going to ride out and try to give Crosby and Malkin and Letang some playoff runs before they inevitably just pull the plug on the roster here?
Well, I mean, I think this is more or less them throwing in the towel now rather than trying to get any more playoff runs out of those guys.
I think that's their. I think that is them throwing in the towel, and they're like, whatever happens this season, kind of just happens. But like we're setting up shop.
I think it's really just saying gone are the days of come trade deadline the Penguins being in on any of the big names that hit the market, you know.
Literally everyone.
Unless the team magically kicks up a fucking tornado and they start kicking ass, I see this as their white flag.
We'll definitely have to keep an eye on the Pittsburgh Penguins, but I mean, I more or less agree. I think that they can certainly crack the playoffs. I just don't know if they can really compete, especially because that goaltending, Tristan Jarry is proving that the increased workload on his shoulder was not something he was necessarily ready for, and maybe needs that kind of safety net type guy like an Anton Hudobin or a Thomas Grice. So we'll have to see what ends up happening with the Pittsburgh Penguins roster. But next, I mean, this is it. This is the big trade, the big news, the big shebang going on in the NHL. It, we questioned last week what the lifespan of PLD on the Columbus Blue Jackets was, and the answer was not very long because Pierre-Luc Dubois, along with Jack Roslovic, was traded to the Winnipeg Jets for Patrick Laine and a third-round pick. Let's just get into it. What are your thoughts? What do you guys think about this trade?
You want to go first, Steve?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, it's not really a surprise to anybody, I don't think, right? Like, everybody saw this coming. And I really think, what was it? He ended up having 3 minutes of playing time in his last game as a Blue Jacket was really the most telling thing about.
I didn't even think it was that much. I think it was like a minute 45 or something like that. It was stupid.
Yeah, so exactly. That kind of says everything you need to say right there, right?
Yeah, he
It
didn't
was a
touch the
situation
ice
that
like the whole
wouldn't
second or
resolve
third period.
itself. Like, it needed somebody to intervene in order for it to get fixed, and
It's kind
just
of funny how it developed though, because you would think that after that game where he got benched like the whole game and then went out and scored like that overtime winner, that maybe something would have like leveled off. But no, it actually just got worse.
yeah, no, he really was not having it.
I'm saying like I think like yeah, PLD was pretty much just like nah, fuck you. I went out there, I scored that goal, proving that I'm better than you and your coaching, so I'm done.
Pretty much.
That's pretty much what that was saying. It was I'm above your coaching. Your coaching doesn't mean anything. If he can go out there and score a goal on the one shift that he plays, like the whole third period and overtime or whatever it was, then it pretty much just says that Tortorella wasn't the reason that he was scoring goals to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody thought Tortorella was the reason he was scoring goals. I
No,
think
no,
it was
but
just
I don't think anyone was saying that, but I think it kind of just proves that, like, it proves to PLD and to Torts, like,
like that he doesn't need him.
yeah, like, the coach, and I don't want to say, like, the team didn't need him, or he didn't need the team, but that it was kind of a big FU, really.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, in terms of value, in terms of future production, how do you guys assess the value on this trade?
Patrick Laine ends up in Arizona.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's hard to say what the like if they got fair value or not, just because like it's just hard to say because we haven't seen either one of them play yet for either of their teams. So that right there is kind of a problem. But
Uh,
the, it's just hard to say. Like they're two disgruntled players who haven't reached their potential yet, and they ended up with a third round pick in Jack Roslovic, yet it being the other pieces. So one, like you're really only looking at it from a one for one perspective, and I don't know. I mean, I get both players needed a change of scenery, so that really wasn't
Subban, Weber, 2.0.
pretty much. So it'll be tough to tell until we actually have like any long term like we see them play for more than 1 year. And that being said, Laine's only got 1 year, so
It's hard to tell with Laine too because he still was playing well like while in Winnipeg. So it's like if he played well while in a shitty environment, how well can he play in a good one?
yeah, that's really it, right?
Not that necessarily Columbus is going to be that good environment for him, but it might be. Like who knows? It can't be any worse than Winnipeg was for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was
At least
the
not right
reason.
now. Maybe in a year or two, Tortorella could
I really think deep down that like he was the problem for a lot of his own like for a lot of what happened to him down there. He was kind of the issue. Like he just thought so highly of himself and just expected to be given things and didn't understand like necessarily that you have to earn them. That
Well,
being
that's
said,
saying
after
okay.
two, I was gonna say, that being said, after 240 goal years, you would think like he's earned a spot in the top six. So I really don't know what's going on there.
Well, we heard reports of issues in the Winnipeg Jets locker room when the Patrick Laine trade rumors first started. Now, initially, the big reason why Laine wanted out of Winnipeg was because he didn't have a second line center. I don't necessarily think it was that he was on the second line that was the big issue. It was that they basically took Mark Scheifele away from him, didn't re-sign Paul Stastny, and then stuck him with Brian Little, who was hurt half the time. And so then who were you playing with at that point? If it
Yeah.
wasn't Brian Little, who even him, no offense to Brian Little, is not a good enough center for a player of Patrick Laine's caliber. It's just the bottom line. And especially for a player like Laine, who, much like Alex Ovechkin, Laine doesn't really create the plays for himself all that much. He's the finisher. You know, yes, he has hands. Yes, he has some nice angles, and yes, he can make plays for himself. But really, his biggest strength is finishing the play. And so when you don't have a center to facilitate that, you kind of just are waiting for a play to develop that never happens. And so that was the initial issue. But then we heard rumors about some toxicity in the locker room. And do you think that any of that was maybe confirmed by Blake Wheeler coming out and saying that he could have done more for Patrick Laine?
I mean, I think that says everything you need to say, right? Like it comes out and says that he wasn't maybe as welcoming or as good to him as he maybe should have been.
What was the official statement? But what did he exactly say?
I think he said something to the effect of, I could have done more for Patrick Laine. Which, I mean, if you want to read between the lines on that, he's not talking about on the ice because didn't play with him. So if he's not talking about helping him out on the ice, what else could he possibly be talking about besides potentially locker room problems? You know what I'm saying?
If
Yeah.
I the official statement just for the quote was, if I communicated better, maybe it would have made things better.
Which that again,
He has nothing but a fan in me. I'll be cheering for him, no doubt about that.
that do we think that there's maybe a toxicity problem in the Jets locker room at this point? I mean, Jack Roslovic wanted nothing to do with the organization either, and he didn't really seemingly have beef with anybody. So, is there a leadership issue in Winnipeg at this point?
I think it might be just like a clash of attitudes of like what
Style of
they were,
hockey.
yeah, like what they thought was the right thing to do. Like, I
You have a
guarantee
bunch
you,
of old guys on the team, and then we know Patrick Laine's video game problem. Like, maybe if they were going out to a dinner and he didn't go because he just wanted to sit inside and play games or something of that nature. Because I could totally see him maybe doing that in his younger career, especially when you have to get up for 4 a.m., 5 a.m. skates and workouts, and you don't want to go out.
I mean, I could totally see that. It might have just
But
been like I said, like they might just not have been compatible, like personality wise, like between everyone in the room and him.
yeah, and I think that that might have made some animosity though, because especially like older generations, like if you don't take kind to their gestures, they take it as like a backhand almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does.
So, there as much as the Laine situation is shrouded in secrecy, there's absolutely no secret about what happened with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and that's that he got on John Tortorella's bad side noticeably publicly last year in the playoffs, where Tortorella was legitimately screaming in his ear on the bench, and you could tell that, everyone's saying, oh, like Tortorella lost him this year. You could tell that he lost him last year because PLD wasn't even looking at him. Like, he
Yeah.
wasn't responding, he wasn't arguing back. At least if a player is arguing back with a coach, they're engaged. They're mentally engaged in the result of the game. Whereas last year, PLD just stared straight ahead, like checked completely out. And this year it got so bad to the point where, Tortorella was still trying to get through to him, and nothing was happening. Um, and do you guys think that, because I personally am of the opinion when you watch some of PLD's shifts that, yes, there's a certain argument to be made for the fact that PLD needs to still put in the effort because some of his shifts were just embarrassing. Like, he just stood there essentially and did nothing. And there's an argument to be made there that, like, look, even if you don't like where you are, you don't like where you're playing, much like with Patrick Laine, you still have to put in the effort. And we saw Laine, at this point was still putting in the effort. I mean, he only played the
He
one
fought
game before
two
his
guys
injury.
precisely the other night.
Yeah.
Literally had two guys on, like one guy in each hand and was swinging because they fucking trucked Laine. They trucked Schleichly.
And he only played the one game, but he had 3 points in the one game, and he was physically engaged. Whereas PLD was like, I'm just going to basically do nothing. So do you guys think that maybe there's an element with PLD that might give you a little bit of pause if you're a coach or a GM by saying, like, listen, this guy has a tendency to check out, and even when he wants out of a place,
No.
he's just not going to play for me at all, period?
I don't know. I think this was a really unique situation, to be honest.
I'm gonna go with a no because he didn't really stop playing per se. I don't think he stopped playing any more than some other people play. Did he play to maybe Tortorella's caliber of back checking and everything? Probably not, but I don't think that he was necessarily avoiding plays because he didn't want to
Well,
move.
I mean, I would disagree with that statement. Just being on it, like I watching him play was like he just wasn't engaged in anything. But
But I don't think he's the only person in the NHL not engaged right now. I think across the board, players and especially superstars are just disengaged.
I don't know if I agree with that statement. I mean, I no, I mean I would. Well, I do disagree with that, but do you think it's any different because of how public the whole situation was too, though? So maybe that there is to Tim's point, like, yeah, maybe there are other players that aren't playing as well as or as engaged as he is right now. But because he was so public with everything, that maybe the spotlight's just on him a little bit more.
I mean, that's probably 100% what it is, to be honest with you. He was just the one willing to say it. Like, he just had an issue and was willing to voice his opinion about it. Whereas a lot of guys wouldn't have. They would have just said, all right, well, I guess that's that then, right?
Do you
So,
guys like how vocal he was about the whole thing, or do you think that it's maybe better for players to just try to handle this internally, say I want to trade, but not necessarily go as
Nah.
public about it?
I don't because he wouldn't have gotten the trade if he didn't go public about it. In all honesty,
probably not.
especially with Tortorella, because Tortorella literally would have just broke him. We've seen it done.
Well, so let me ask you a question then. Do you feel good about Patrick Laine's personality match with the Columbus Blue Jackets at all?
Well, you see, I don't know. I don't know Patrick Laine, so I can't I don't know if it's his personality per se. Like, or rather, I don't know if it's his work ethic or his personality. Because if it's his personality, then it doesn't fucking matter. If it's his work ethic, then he's not gonna do it. He won't make the cut in Tortorella's system. But like, if he's just like kind of prissy or whatever, it's not like Tortorella hasn't dealt with fucking princesses before. He's a coach. He's not an idiot, despite what we may think. If Laine puts in the work and goes out there and is productive and is a good player, I don't think it'll be an issue.
I agree. I think it really depends on his whole attitude, is whether or not it's going to be a
If
good
him and
fit for
PLD
him.
go into their places hungry, then they'll do well.
I gotta kind of go a different way on this because I honestly, I don't really feel great about Patrick Laine's prospects in Columbus, only just because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Patrick Laine is like a bad defensive player, but that's not what he's known for, and he's not a big shot blocker. He's not a big get into corners and grind it out guy. He's very much he's like the last piece of the puzzle when it comes to a play, right? Like the guy that goes into the corner and wins the puck, passes it back out, who then gets it over to Laine for the one timer, right? Like he's very much the last cog in that machine. And we've seen it historically where even when teams make these big moves, to bring in high-end talent, that Tortorella has a tendency to try to break them down and change them into his type of player. I mean,
But Tortorella also understands the situation that he created in that what's going on. I don't think he's gonna. I think he understands that Patrick Laine also wasn't happy, and he's not gonna kick in the door when he walks in like, "What's up, pussy?" Like he's gonna. I think he'll realistically be like, "Yo, you weren't happy, and you're not gonna be happy here if you don't work. But if you work, we won't have an issue." And that's where his work ethic will come into play. If it's actually there, and I think it's there, he looks like he wants to play. He looks hungry, like he's out there. When he was playing, he looked like he wanted to play, or at least score goals rather. Maybe not always play, but he always looked like he was hungry for the net.
I I think there's something to be said, and I mean I've been bouncing this idea off of you guys for since this trade happened. My I guess you could call it a conspiracy theory that Jarmo Kekalainen probably has talked with John Tortorella at some point regarding the Laine trade, and he's probably told him like, look, I know you want your players to play a certain way. I know that the team has an identity, but bottom line, end of the day, we need to score goals, and this is a guy that's going to do it. So I don't need you ruining his drive and his motivation 10 games into his tenure as a Columbus Blue Jacket, especially because he's a free agent this year. Now he's a restricted free agent.
But yeah.
But who's to say that he doesn't just sit out and pull a William Nylander and just hold out until either he gets a offer sheet and then the Jackets have to match, or what's to say that he doesn't just hold out if he's not happy. I don't think he will, because Patrick Laine wants to play. It's obvious that he's not the kind of guy, like he's not an Ilya Kovalchuk type guy where he doesn't really care so much about the National Hockey League and he just wants money. But it's important that this is a contract year for him. So Laine has a little bit of extra incentive to put up some numbers. It's really funny when you really start to break it down. Like everybody in this situation, specifically regarding the Columbus Blue Jackets, has something to lose, right? Laine is on a contract year, so he's playing for money. John Tortorella, at this point, after having lost Bobrovsky, Panarin, and we don't know if that was because of him. There was really no inkling that was the case. They just wanted extra money that the Jackets didn't have. But being a coach who was the head coach during a time when they lost Panarin, Bobrovsky, at this point PLD, PLD being very much his fault in a lot of ways. There's incentive for Tortorella to maybe not ride Patrick Laine as hard as some other players, because if Laine is disinterested 30 games into the season, I have a feeling that Kekalainen he's not on a very long leash, especially when you consider that Kekalainen's job is on the line at this point, because if they'd make this trade for Patrick Laine and he doesn't produce because their coach is riding him too hard, and then he doesn't want to resign because he hates Tortorella's guts, well, who does that all fall back on? That's now Jarmo Kekalainen's neck is on the line at this point. So, it's a very tennis situation in Columbus for everybody involved, where everybody has a lot of incentive to succeed in this situation. Now, they get Jack Roslovic, who's very much a Tortorella-type player. I think that Roslovic's going to make Tortorella very happy, but do you guys see PLD so much as a fit in Winnipeg? Sorry, I know Steve, you were very excited about the prospects of him playing in Winnipeg. How do we feel about the fit between PLD, his player type, and that top six in Winnipeg?
I mean, I just think it's a good fit because you can never have too much depth down the middle, really.
I think it'll work out well. I mean, PLD's a good player. And he also clearly wanted to play. So, otherwise he wouldn't have made a big fussy about getting out of there and wanting to play. He would have just let it go. So, I don't know. Kind of believe in him a little bit, for what it's worth.
If you're Paul Maurice, what are you doing as far as your top six is concerned? Because obviously you have Scheifele as your number one center. Right now, you had Paul Stastny as the de facto second line center, who was essentially brought into Winnipeg to try to avoid this whole situation. Do you stick with Paul Stastny on the third line, have PLD center? Do you put PLD on a wing? How do you fit PLD into your top six?
I mean, you probably have to shift into the wing this year just because of, you have Paul Stastny there, but I don't think it'll really be an issue going forward. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a good fit. I really don't have a lot to say on it. I don't know. I just think the prospect of him playing with Nikolai Ehlers now, balances the top six a little more and gives him a little more room when your top line is Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, Now if you can run a second line of Dubois, Ehlers, and Stastny, you're matching up pretty well with most teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets have a really nice top six. I think that's not really a secret. Everyone knows that. And it definitely makes it a very interesting team to watch. I mean, they're 5-2 so far this year. They're outscoring their defensive deficiencies because their defense isn't really doing them a whole lot of favors right now. They're still allowing a lot of goals, but they're able to at least outscore their problems to this point. So, any final thoughts on the Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine trade?
Not that I can think of.
No, I mean, I think we pretty much touched up on the whole trade.
Is there anything specifically that you guys wanted to touch on for this week in the NHL?
Not that I could think of.
I'm a little curious how you think that there aren't superstars that are underperforming.
There's a difference between superstars underperforming and superstars being checked out. I really have not to this point seen any superstar giving up on a play as much as Dubois had.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with you on that. I really do think that, one, Malkin's lazy, but he's playing like dog shit, but that attends to his laziness. I think that Elias Pettersson looks really lazy. I think that JT Miller looks hella fucking lazy.
Is he a superstar, though?
For that team, yeah, he is, and he's definitely a superstar, honestly. Did you watch him in the playoffs? He put up, this most points on the whole team. I think he had, 14 or 15 points.
The thing about Malkin, though, is, this isn't anything new for him. Because he looked bad last year, and he looked lazy last year, too. And he's always had a tendency in his career to go through these stretches where, for some reason, for, 20 games at a time, you hardly even notice that he's on the ice. So I don't know if that's necessarily a new thing for him.
Mm, I see your point on that one, but I still think that around the league there's a bit of laze amongst the like. I think that the lack of fans is really tending to people not like playing as hard. Maybe I don't know if that's like the proper way to phrase that or not.
Well, I mean, that was a
But
challenge that has been brought up. Like, Patrick Kane actually said the other day that he's actually sick and tired of the fake fan noise and that he just doesn't want to hear it anymore. Um, he, it's funny. Like, he made the joke that he was about to go ask them to turn it off mid game one time. And I mean, there's definitely something to be said for, yeah, like, it's definitely hard for some of these guys to get amped and riled when you're playing, when you go from playing even on your worst nights for a team that has low attendance, playing in front of only like 10,000 people, and some teams that fill out their stadiums like in Chicago you're talking about 16, 18,000 people, to literally
Chicago's
like,
upwards of 20,000 people on a good night.
oh, I forgot that their stadium's that big. Yeah. um but yeah, like you go from playing in front of, on a bad night, 10,000 people to literally zero. And if you're in some of the stadiums that are allowing people, maybe up to like, I think some of them are up to like 800 fans. So it's definitely hard, to go from electric buildings, even when you're on the road, you know, hearing the buzz of the crowd, to the same artificial noise over and over and over again. So I definitely think that could be a part of it. Um, and I think that another part of it also just might be like these compressed schedules are getting to some of them. You're playing back to backs and 4 games in 6 nights, and you're playing different teams, so like you don't have for some of these teams, you're playing teams that you don't really necessarily consider as rivals. Like you're playing, does Vegas really care about playing Minnesota 6 times a year? Not really. I mean, there's definitely a lot of factors that could contribute to a feeling of disconnect from this particular season.
yeah, and that's kind of all I'm saying is like I just don't really is that I feel like I'm seeing a lot of players disconnected.
It's definitely something
I
to,
don't.
to keep an eye on for sure. Um, Especially amongst like a lot of the veterans, maybe, that have been in the league for a longer period of time. Um, Patterson is an interesting case that we're gonna keep an eye on him, and if he continues to struggle, we'll definitely have a segment. I segmented that word into 2 words. A segment about him on a later podcast, because it is an interesting topic to kind of discuss why he's having such a hard time and why the Canucks in general are having a hard time this year. But we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Did you want to add anything else about that, Tim?
I mean, not really. I was just curious about why you thought that more than anything because like I already have my opinion and like my views on who I think is and isn't really playing that we don't really agree on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep an eye on it. And if it continues to be this situation where it becomes more noticeable, I'm sure it'll be talked about at some point. But any last minute things you guys want to bring up during this episode?
Not that I can think of.
No, I'm pretty good.
Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this week. As far as what happens on the next episode of the podcast, who knows? Not really up to us. It's really up to what happens in the National Hockey League. So we'll just keep an eye on it. Like I've said last week, if you have any topics you want us to talk about, any specific requests, feel free to either leave it in the comments or reach out to us on Twitter at Lighting the Lamb 1, LAM1. You can reach out to me on my personal if you want, which has been in videos before. Yeah, if you got anything you want to talk about, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to just keep picking topics, and we're just going to keep talking hockey as the season goes on. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.